Hey, Marvin asked me to real quick redo this video because I guess the last one was going a little bit too fast. I wanted to add also this portion right here. This is from the Office of Legislative Research. Um, and I believe that's for Connecticut, on interrogation techniques. And it's about the Reid method of interrogation. Okay. And it explains a Reid technique. But here is what factual analysis is and how they come up with a suspect. Okay. But what's really important is a certain part. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys read. But this right here is it's based on such things as for the particular suspect's probable guilt or innocence, on gender, race, occupation, marital status, opportunity, stuff like that. But this right here is really concerning because we're not supposed to base it on that. Um, and so that is a very troublesome thing. The Reid technique is taught all throughout the U.S. and has been since the 50s. It's also during the interrogation where you accuse them whether or not you think they're guilty as if they are guilty and try to get them to commit to saying that they did something whether or not they did it. Okay, so here's the stuff for Marvin's case. It's the physical evidence, and then I also have the highlighted MPD manual pages. And then I have some stuff from Attorney General Janet Reno and that was put out. So this is the initial on-scene dealio from the crime lab. What happens when they get to the scene, for the first initial officers, they secure the scene, they make sure to see if emergency medicine needs to be performed, and if so, they call ambulance because loss of life over preservation of the crime scene, just to the point of saving somebody's life. You're not going to purposely decimate the crime scene. After that, then they put up red tape around everything they want the crime lab to go over, and the crime lab then goes and does that portion of the scene. And they gather the evidence, the photos, everything else. During that time frame, the entry and exit to the scene is restricted. And I'll show you where it shows that later. But it's basically investigator, only certain officers are allowed in there. It's supposed to be a log, stuff like that. Anyway, it describes the scene, what happened there at the scene, and what evidence that they found. Okay, so this describes where the evidence was that they found, what they did, video sketch, stuff like that. There's a couple different things that are really important, and that's the back door was left ajar. And then also right here it says what evidence they collected. Okay. And all collected items will be inventoried and the video retained in the files. Okay. So there's 2 bullets found and they were collected, and a birthday card and plastic holder, and then flower wrapping green tissue paper. On the second one, I only have page 2, but it's more detailed on what exactly was found at this scene and what was collected. Okay, the 2 fired deformed bullets, 1 card holder, and then the prints, because they processed it for prints, green wrapping paper, and that was that. Okay. It was moved. They have to explain why it was moved. It was moved for the dog to be able to get the scent off it. And that's the reason why the scene was disturbed as far as the green paper. And that was turned over to Timmerman. Okay. Now, before I get to this property inventory, I'm going to go ahead and scroll over here to this property inventory. This is everything that they had for the case. Okay, on here, let me zoom in. You have the date right here that it was received, who found it, or processed it, turned it into evidence, basically. The PI number, you have their badge number and stuff like that as well. Okay, these are the 2 deformed bullets, and that was on the 17th. Said to see the report, so that's probably this gentleman over here. Didn't get the first name up here, so because it was only part of that page. Okay, everything else from the scene, again, the PI numbers is done on the 17th. Okay, the 18th, this is the day after when they went back and picked up the stuff, and that is in a supplemental report. And it goes on. Okay, the stuff from the autopsy, the stuff that was picked up from the search warrant, right? Everything else. Again, the dates is what's important. Okay, right there, 5/24. The videotape, stuff like that from the interviews. This is from the search warrant. Okay, big thing here though, 6-1, what was put in by who? Okay, this right here is the information sheets, the cassettes, but there's more right here from Matson, Sergeant Matson. See, these all have the place that it was obtained at. Right here it's blank because it's just the interviews that's already there at the site. This is where it was picked up at. So, alright, but this is the address of that flower shop. It's on 6-1. Okay, so from the flower shop they have new evidence. Right here is a PI number. That's the inventory number. It's to be held as evidence for fingerprints. What would they find at the flower shop? Clean bore gun kit, or gun cleaning kit. Okay, 7 individual hand signs. The photographs of them. Again on 6-1, Matson, PI number, and then the location. That's the flower shop. It's holding for prints. This right here. When 9mm Luger, DCC stands for discharged cartridge casing. Okay. And so what that is, that's the brass shell of this right here. That's the bottom portion. This is the projectile, that's the cartridge. So it's a discharged cartridge casing. It would come out of a gun similar to this. Or this is the older, I think, World War II style. This is a more modern style, but it's in semi-automatic. The bullet goes out here, and the cartridge casing gets ejected out right here. Okay, 9mm Speer Luger live cartridges, which would look something like this. Okay, and there is a difference. That first thing I pulled up is picture right here. There's other pictures like this. Okay, here's a 9mm. Here's a 38 Special. 38 Super is different too. But 38 Special, the Smith & Wesson, it appears was a 38 Special. And they found 3 38 Smith & Wesson live cartridges. 38 Smith & Wesson pistol looks like this though. Okay, it's a revolver. However, it is very doubtful that a robber or somebody coming to do nefarious things at a business is going to bring a gun cleaning kit. The gun cleaning kit looks like this. Okay, you have a smaller one for handguns, and then you have a larger one for your rifles and shotguns, because you put your cleaner on this and you attach these, actually screw into the rod for the rifles. You got to push that down the bore to get it clean. The handguns, the bore is a lot smaller. Okay, so it's a gun cleaning kit. I'm not sure which one it is, because it doesn't say. But there's a gun cleaning kit to clean firearms. There's a discharged firearm casing. And then there's a 9mm live cartridge, 1, and 338 live cartridges. So this one would go to this gun, and this one right here would go to this gun. That was found at the flower shop, supposedly 2 weeks later. There's no record of where it came from though, and that's the problem. It should have been found on this day at the flower shop, processed by the crime lab, and actually had a chain of custody form. Like, it's supposed to go from who took it from the scene, what happened to it. You're supposed to sign in and where you found it at the scene, so that way they can reconstruct the scene. Okay, well, there's nothing. So for 2 weeks he held on to it until this day, and then turned it in. Okay, crime scene supervision talks about processing the crime scene and making sure you get everything. There's regulations behind this. This is from the MPD 2022 manual, and this is the date that this version was put out. But this is from the MPD 2022 manual. You're supposed to preserve and process evidence. Here's the crime lab personnel. Okay, they're the only ones that cross the red crime scene tape, like I said earlier, and then they process that portion of the crime scene. Okay, assistance from crime lab, how to do that and what the rules are. Okay, evidence identified at any crime scene which is not photographed or collected by the investigator or crime lab personnel must be identified and documented in a supplemental report as to the reasons why it was not collected or photographed at the scene. The investigator still has to log that he found it and where he found it, though. Homicide or suspicious death scene, what to do, including not to allow anything to be touched or moved at the scene. If anything is touched or moved, inform investigators and document it in KPARs. Do not remove anything from the scene unless instructed by investigators. Evidence processing. Okay, it's supposed to be processed for physical analysis. Prior to that, they have to log it. And it goes into specifics later on here about the discharged shell casings. Okay, the chain of custody. He has to document every person that had custody of it from the time it was collected until its final disposition. Here's what evidence is. Okay, all documents, oral statements, material objects admissible as testimony in a court of law. Any item that comes into the custody of the police department employee that may prove or disprove the commission of a crime or identity of a suspect pursuant to an official criminal investigation. A responsibility to inventory and property and evidence. Okay, it goes into PIMS, which is a property inventory management system. The MPD employee should have to document it prior to the end of their shift. They have temporary lockers for certain things they can't put into temporary lockers. Okay. But it has to be properly stored and secured. Okay, evidence created during an investigation. They have to inventory it. They have to put it in the system. Okay, no firearms or discharge casings. Discharge casings that were found at the scene, they have to be brought in before the end of the shift, not 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later on 6/1. Okay. It has to be brought directly to the evidence warehouse. Okay, firearms, this as well can't be stored at the precincts or at other MPD evidence locker locations. It's pretty cut and paste. Now I'll provide links to these background information below. The actual photos and the actual reports like this, I cannot. I don't have the links to those at this time. I was sent that through, via different means. Right here is their initial investigation, and the evidence that they found should be in here, or in the lab report. There's nothing in here about him finding that or submitting it to evidence. And in fact, in all their supplementals, it doesn't show that it was ever processed or properly put into evidence other than that line item on the property inventory. There should be some documentation as to where they found it if they're going to process the crime scene correctly. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing in this crime scene investigator guide for law enforcement that was put out by Janet Reno. Okay, the Attorney General back in the day. This has been going. So 1999 is this copy. Oh, sorry, January 2000 was when this was published. But you can go through here. I'll put a link down below. You can see how they're supposed to process the scene. But if they don't process the scene properly, they can't come to the proper conclusions. It was never investigated properly. We don't know what happened. Because if you had a gun cleaning kit and you had the bullets, 38 special 9mm, okay, at the scene, it would be reasonable to assume that a robber is not going to bring a revolver and bullets that don't fit that revolver, leave it behind, and an empty shell casing behind, and a gun cleaning kit. So the question is, at some time in the past, was there a 38 special or a Smith & Wesson 38 at the flower shop? The live ammo and gun cleaning kit would suggest it was either stored there or brought there at some time in the past. Same thing with the 9mm. So, was it ever checked whether or not the flower shop owned any of these weapons? Was the location of these weapons ever checked? And in fact, were the actual projectiles checked? Because they have two projectiles that they assumed were from this type of a round. And the only difference between the 38 Special and the 357 is the length of the bullet. Not the bullet, the length of the cartridge. So the shell casing down here. So this part up here at the top. Let's see if I can get this bigger. No, it won't. Okay. Nope. It won't. Anyway, so this at the top right here, the projectile, is the same. It's just the amount of powder that's in here is different. And the lab came to the conclusion that it was either a 357 or 38 Special that was fired at the scene with the two deformed bullets, the two fired bullets. But how can they come to a conclusion of what happened there if we do not know whether or not there was an actual firearm like this or like this ever at the scene, as the investigator decided to take home one of these and three of these and one of the brass part down here that was fired from a pistol. And how is the narrative that it was a revolver? And Sergeant Timmerman came to that conclusion in trial. That's on the appellant's brief and has a testimony line in there. I believe it is 784, right around there in the testimony. Sergeant Timmerman says that he had concluded that it was a revolver based on there being no discharged shell casings. However, right here there is a discharged shell casing. So this information was obviously not provided to Sergeant Timmerman. So that brings up a lot more questions on how the MPD can hide evidence, withhold evidence, and then submit it into property holding after it being God knows where for however long, and then not disclosed even to the lab. Because that's, if Sergeant Timmerman knew about it and lied about it, that'd be perjury. Yeah, that's, hopefully we can find more, and hopefully I explained that well enough. If you have any questions, I guess, contact me, and I will make sure to get that to you.